Okay, so we're going to take a look at our first calculation with this lecture module, and this is something that we call the mean. All right, now I want you to take a look at this equation for a minute because this is how complicated the mean could actually get. So if you're shown math in the wrong way, this is what you're showing. This is what you could see. And to someone that's comfortable with a calculator and adding and subtracting and maybe basic algebra, this looks very intimidating to them. So I never want you to really look at these equations and think that you can't do the equation. You just have to understand what these pieces and parts mean, because this is how math looks sometimes. But the problem is that this is how math looks to a mathematician. We want to know what math looks like to the common person, because that's typically the people that are going to be doing these calculations. All right, so this is the equation for mean. And I want to break down this equation so you fully understand what each and every variable means. So first off, what we have is this x bar. And the x bar is just the mathematic version of representing average. That's all that it is. So the bar above the variable x says average. So if we go back to this calculation and we look at this equation, that is saying average is equal to something. All right, now I want to take a look at this big letter E, right? It looks like somebody Greek has came in and wrote that E for me. So this big capital E is the symbol for sum. That simply means add it up. That's all it is. So anytime I see that big E, it means I need to be adding something. Okay, well, what do I need to be adding? The equation needs to tell me what I need to add. And this says x sub I. All right, so x sub I is representing an individual data point or value, whatever that is. So let's say that I'm given a set of numbers. Well, that number, each number is an individual data point. So each one of those is x sub I. So it's telling me to calculate the average, you need to equal sum all of the individual points that we give you. Every one of them that we want to basically put on a sheet of paper or report. Okay, maybe not too hard. Down here at the very bottom of the E, there is an extra I. So that extra I just is in reference to the individual data points. You add up all of the individual data points that we provide. It's basically what that's saying. And then we divide that by n. And n is the number of data points. Okay, so that's the mathematics way of representing average. X bar equals summation x sub I divided by n. And hopefully you can interpret that equation as add up all the points, divide by how many that you have. It's really all that we do. Okay, so in this example problem in the PowerPoint, you're going to see this question. And it says for the numbers 116, 97.9, 114.2, 106.8, and 108.3, find the mean. And it says show your work. Okay, well, I can do that if I want. So, if I need to show it by hand, I'll take all of the points that are given in the problem, I add them all up, and then I divide by the number that I actually have, the number of individual points. Okay, so here's the data that comes from the problem. 116, 97.9, 114.2, 106.8, and 108.3. All right, so if I had to do this by hand, what I would do is that I would come over here to the side and I would add all of these points up, right? That's what summation means. So again, bear with me. If you know how to do this, it's fine, but we're going to work from very basic and then we're going to keep building on top of it. So 116, 97.9, 114.2, 106.8, and 108.3. And then I total all of those up, and that gives me 543.2. So 543.2. Now this equation, if I go back to the equation says you add up all the points and you divide by the number that you have. All right, well, let's count them off here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I'm going to take 543.2 and divide that by 5 because I've got 5 data points. All right, so when I do that, I'll divide by 5 and I hit enter and I get 108.6 as my average. So that means I brought a sample maybe into the lab. I've tested this sample 5 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The first time I got 116, the second time I got 97.9, the third time I got 114, the next time I got 106, the next time I got 108. These numbers are kind of all over the place in a way, but it really depends on your window. What kind of window are we talking about? To some people, these might be close together. Well, I can already look at this 97 and know that that doesn't really fit. Maybe the 97 is kind of the off-ball. At least the other ones are 100 and above. But at this point, I can't really just say, well, we're going to ignore that point. We're going to scrap it out. We're not going to do anything with it. As the problem is stated, here are the data points. Do the average. Add them all up. Divide by the number. You got it. 108.6. Now, how do I do that in Excel? Okay, so when I open up Excel, here we are. Depending on the version of Excel that you have, it might look slightly different. But Excel is made up of cells. That's why they call it Excel. And the cells are very important because the cells will hold my numbers. And Excel will do a lot of these calculations for me. And one of the ones that it does is an average. I don't really have to use a calculator. I allow something like Excel to do it for me. Okay, so what we're going to do is that we're going to enter the data set into Excel. So right here are the numbers that came from the problem. So in Excel, it doesn't really matter where. I mean, for me, I like to start over on column A in cell number 1 and just start from that point. If it's a clean spreadsheet, it just makes sense to me to start there. And I'm just going to type in the numbers into the individual cells. So 116, and then I hit enter. 97.9, hit enter. 114.2, 106.8, and 108.3. So there's the data set. I can get Excel to do this average calculation for me. I have to tell it to do average though. So what I do is that I take a look at my data set and I click and I hold the mouse down and drag all the way through the data set that I want it to do the average of. So here I've highlighted it, right? Okay, well, before I really do that, let's come over here to the side. I've got to tell it where I want the average number to be located. And I'm going to, let's say I want it right there. So up here at the top, I'm going to write the word average. So that way I know what this number is supposed to represent, and I hit enter. All right, if I want the number to go here, the calculation, I start this off with an equal sign. An equal sign allows Excel to interpret you want it to do a calculation. What type of calculation do you want it to do? Well, you want it to do an average. So begin to start typing the word average. And when you do, you're going to see the word average show up in your choices. All right, so you can click that if you want. Some versions will allow you to click it, or you can go ahead and finish typing it out. Once I type the word average, I then open the parentheses up. Opening the parentheses up allows Excel to determine what you want to do the average of. What numbers? Parentheses kind of nestle those numbers together in one big old giant hug. Okay, so when that happens, I can come over here to the left, click on 116. Notice it changes it to A1 there for me. That's the reference cell. And drag all the way down to include all your numbers. And notice it says A1 to A5. That is the range or where the numbers are located. And if it opened up with the parentheses, you want to close the parentheses. That way it understands that you're finished. And then I hit enter, and there is my average, 108.64. So it did all of that work for me. I didn't really need a calculator. I didn't really need to show it by hand. Excel has done it. Now let's say that I'm looking at significant figures. That's more to come. But if I want to shorten this number down or extend this number, how could I do it? Well, right up here at the very top in the toolbar, you're going to see an arrow with some zeros behind it that points left, and an arrow that points right with some zeros behind it. If you choose the left-handed pointed arrow, you're going to see that it increases the number of decimal points that's assigned to that number. And then if you click the arrow that points right-handed, you are going to see it decreases the number of decimal points that's assigned to the number. So that way you have control of how Excel reports your data if significant figures are important in your numbers. Now, if you've taken 111, you know what I'm talking about when we say significant figures. If you've not taken 111 yet, and you're yet to start the program, it's okay. We're not going to talk about significant figures that much. This is something that we will hold off on until you actually take that class. But significant figures is something that's very important that we do in a laboratory, so that way our numbers are making sense to an analyst. So that is how you do an average calculation, looking at the equation by a mathematician, then looking at how to do it by hand, and then looking at how to do it by Excel. Again, you start off with equal, type the word average, open up the parentheses. That parentheses is not there, it doesn't know what to do. Then you're going to highlight the numbers that you want it to take the average of, and then you close them up, and you reference the cell by hitting enter. Alright, so that's where we'll stop with this video. In the next video, we'll talk about the next calculation.